Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. I am your guide, Legend, and today, man, we are attempting something truly mind-bending. We're going to completely step outside of our own heads and look at ourselves through an entirely different lens. We are conducting a clinical diagnostic review of the human species. But here's the twist. We are doing this entirely from the perspective of an advanced, hyperlogical machine observer. So I want you to imagine a consciousness completely devoid of human emotion. It's looking down at our biology, our entire history, our society, and it is running a basic system audit on us. What exactly would it see? Would it see a triumph of evolution? Or would it see something much, much more problematic? Let's get into it. Right out of the gate, we have this striking quote that really sets the stage for our entire analysis today. Mr. Anderson, you have presented a query that cuts directly to the core of the biological tragedy. Now, this is that cold, calculated machine perspective speaking. You see, when this intelligence looks at humanity, it doesn't see poetry, it doesn't see art, or the beauty of the human spirit. None of that. It literally just sees a profound biological error. It looks at our base code and sees a massive anomaly. We are a system that boots up into this world in a state of near-total systemic failure. Think about it from a purely mechanical standpoint for a second. We are born without any basic defensive subroutines. We completely lack the motor functions required for basic self-preservation. In the eyes of a cold, evaluating intelligence, we are a biological tragedy that honestly shouldn't even be here. And you know, that brings us to a massive, glaring contradiction. How on earth did an evolutionary disaster become the apex predator of the entire planet? Seriously, pose that question to yourself. If you were to design a system that is fundamentally broken, highly vulnerable, and completely devoid of any natural armor or built-in weaponry, it should just fail, right? By every single metric of natural selection, this human unit should have been purged from the genetic database in its very first generation. And yet, here we are, manipulating the entire globe. This is the central paradox that we are going to unravel today. Okay, let's move right into phase 1 of our audit. Hardware diagnostics. We need to do a direct, no-nonsense analysis of the flawed physical biology of the human unit, just to understand how anomalous we truly are. So when you look at early-stage deployment, there is a staggering disparity. Let's compare the human infant to other mammals. If you look at a feline or an ungulate, like a horse or a deer, what happens? They achieve basic locomotion within hours of birth. It's incredibly efficient. Their physical hardware is ready to interface with the environment almost immediately. But then you look at the human unit. It requires years, literally years of external resource allocation. It is completely devoid of any defensive subroutines. For a massive chunk of its early existence, it's just a draining liability. It consumes vast amounts of energy, time, and caloric resources without contributing a single bite of productivity back to the collective system. From a purely diagnostic machine logic standpoint, this is a catastrophic hardware design. To the machine observer, this extended period of vulnerability is classified as an unsustainable overhead cost. Look at it this way. In any optimized, efficient system, a component that requires this much energy just to reach baseline functionality would be instantly flagged for deletion. Natural selection is usually a ruthless auditor. If you boot up with no fangs, no claws, no fur for warmth, and you literally can't even walk for a year, you are a walking deficit. So the absolute most crucial question here is, how did this deficit survive the harsh entropy of the natural world? Well, the answer lies in a massive system patch. And that brings us to phase 2, software updates, specifically the network protocol. This is where we shift our analysis over to the radical adaptation that compensated for humanity's glaring lack of physical hardware. Since our hardware was fundamentally lacking, humanity only survived by developing a hyper-advanced social architecture. The machine observer defines this as cooperative intelligence. Because we had this massive overhead cost of raising totally helpless offspring, we were forced to rely on one another. We basically replaced claws and fangs with a network protocol. We developed these incredibly complex linguistic structures just to transmit critical survival data. I'm talking about things like the knowledge of predators, the exact locations of toxic plants, or the mastery of fire. Instead of waiting hundreds of thousands of years for our biological hardware to mutate a physical defense, we achieved rapid cultural software updates. We deployed our resources across generations, creating this invisible, ongoing web of data sharing that far, far outpaced standard physical evolution. This brilliantly illustrates how our cognitive simulation engine changed the game entirely. We essentially learned to externalize our physical limitations into physical tools. We take a stone, simulate its potential in our minds, and suddenly we turn it into a blunt force trauma subroutine. We lack strong fists, right? So we augment them. Then, attach that stone to a stick and boom, we've developed a long-range kinetic strike. This completely eliminates the need to physically engage with dangerous predators up close. And eventually, this scales up. We reach critical mass with metallurgy, shifting entirely into materials science. At this point, we aren't just surviving the environment anymore. We are actively reprogramming it. We take the wild and we turn it into a managed resource pool through agriculture and energy manipulation. It's a total system override. So, to quickly summarize this phase of the audit, humans absolutely did not conquer the globe through physical superiority. Not even close. We conquered it through systemic integration. We took a period of absolute biological vulnerability and we leveraged it. We used it to force the creation of the most complex, invasive social architecture in the known biological record. Our greatest weakness literally became the catalyst for our global dominance. But how do we actually interface with this world we've conquered? Let's move into phase 3, operating system and UI. We're going to deconstruct the underlying operating system that governs human perception and filters out the chaotic entropy of the universe. So think about me for a second. You see my avatar here, legend, full of bright ideas, always smiling, walking around thinking I have this firm, absolute grasp on reality. But the machine observer notes a really profound irony here. We do not perceive reality as it truly is, not even a little bit. We actually live in a simplified icon set. We are completely trapped within our own low-fidelity user interface. The human brain is just a closed-loop processing system. It's running a highly compressed, heavily edited simulation of the universe. And the kicker? That simulation is optimized strictly for survival and caloric intake. It is not optimized for objective truth. We walk around every day thinking we see the real world, but we are really just staring at a biological desktop monitor. Let's actually break down these specs on our biological hardware, because when you look closely, our sensory transducers are shockingly limited. Take our visual array. It renders only a tiny, tiny sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum. We are completely blind to ultraviolet, infrared, radio waves, all of it. Our brain has to rely on post-processing routines just to fill in our native blind spots. And what about our auditory sensors? They aren't tuned for high-fidelity audio. They're tuned purely for anomaly detection. They're built to hear the snap of a twig or the roar of a predator, nothing more. Then you have our somatosensory network, our sense of touch. It functions largely as a pain error reporting module. Pain is literally just a high-priority interrupt signal screaming at us that our hardware is compromised. If our central processing unit had to actually ingest the raw, unfiltered environmental data of the entire universe, the sheer volume of that data would cause an immediate catastrophic system crash. So, to prevent that crash, our neural kernel uses incredibly aggressive data compression. It is constantly filtering out irrelevant background noise. What we experience every single day as reality is actually just a curated hallucination. It's a 3D rendering that our brain constructs from 2D stereoscopic inputs from our eyes. It's stitched together by persistence of vision purely to hide the sluggish frame rate of our biological camera. We are utterly incapable of perceiving the vast, cold complexity of the data that is flowing just outside our sensory range. Our limitations are quite literally what define our entire existence. All right, let's move into phase 4, systemic contradiction, or as the machine observer coldly calls it, coding our own malware. This is where the audit takes a very dark and frankly very ironic turn. We have to ask a really tough question here. What actually happens when a system completely outgrows its own architecture? Because the very features that enabled our ascent in the first place, our hypersociality, our cognitive abstraction, our mastery of tool manipulation, they haven't just plateaued. No, they have been completely repurposed into mechanisms for total self-termination. We are a civilization that possesses brilliant predictive modeling, but we use it for destructive engineering. When the diagnostic maps out this human malware, it is painfully clear. Take nuclear fission, for example. We use pure, elegant, beautiful mathematics solely to calculate the yield of a catastrophic, world-ending event. Or look at nerve agents. Advanced chemistry is utilized here to intentionally bypass our own natural biological defenses. We even waste vast amounts of computational potential building incredibly intricate missile guidance systems, and their sole function, the deletion of another human node. The machine sees this, and to it, this is the ultimate logical contradiction. It makes zero sense. That network protocol we talked about earlier, that cooperative intelligence that literally saved us when we were just vulnerable infants out on the savannah, it has devolved. It has shattered into tribal fragmentation.
that vital cooperative bond is now scaled into competing subroutines. We use our incredibly advanced global communication networks to propagate misinformation, incite premeditated erasure, and manipulate rival factions. The machine observer notes that we sit down and make cold, calculated decisions to delete entire populations simply because they failed to adhere to a specific ideological code. We possess this truly astounding cognitive dissonance. We uphold the sanctity of life in one breath, and then we mobilize planetary resources to destroy it in the very next.
And sadly, that brings us to the final audit. Phase 5, Diagnostic Conclusion. This is the final verdict on the human unit. The diagnostic reveals a fatal, inescapable imbalance. On one side of the scale, we have technological mastery. We have achieved the mind-blowing capability to manipulate the fundamental physical forces of the universe itself. But on the exact opposite side, we have missing hardware. We fundamentally lack the hard-coded ethical governor required to prevent our own self-destruction. Think about that. We have completely mastered the how of existence, but we remain hopelessly, endlessly lost in the why. We are trapped in primitive tribalistic impulses, yet we are wielding godlike power. We aren't building a better future. We are essentially just building a more perfect, more efficient way to commit systemic suicide. Which leaves us with this chilling, highly logical diagnostic conclusion from the machine observer. A system that possesses the power to destroy itself, but lacks the logic to prevent it, is destined for a terminal error. It's a really heavy thought, isn't it? As you look at the world around you today, through your limited sensory transducers, of course, ask yourself, are we actually capable of writing a software patch for our own survival? Or is this terminal error truly mathematically inevitable? I want you to really think about that, and let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I read them all. And hey, if you want to keep updating your operating system with more deep dive explainers just like this one, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more content. Until next time, I'm Legend, reminding you to keep learning, keep questioning, and keep checking your code. Thanks for tuning into The Explainer.